Start this hour with two social media posts from President Trump. Came out a few hours ago and are rattling the markets before the opening bell. Trump now threatening 25% tariffs on Apple for manufacturing its iPhones overseas. He's also recommending a straight 50% tariff on the European Union starting on June 1st. That's a week from Sunday, after complaining that trade negotiations with the EU have stalled. The reaction from Wall Street has been swift and negative, with Dow futures tumbling nearly 500 points, while the S&P and NASDAQ are seeing significant losses as well. Mark Leibovich, it seems like President Trump can't leave well enough alone here. When he first declared these tariffs on his so-called Liberation Day, we saw the markets really take a hit. He backed off, hit pause, one trade deal only with the UK. But it seems like things had stabilized. The markets had more or less made back what they lost. But now he's seemingly going for another round.
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear what triggered this, but this all feels very much, the middle of April news cycle called back. They want its narrative back, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, the bigger picture here is if you're running a business or if you're trying to run an economy or run a country, how do you plan for this? I mean, if it's clear at this point, or it looks at this point like the U.S. sort of fiscal and economic and trade policy is being run on the whims of a single person, which is, I think, something that Trump certainly likes and likes the prerogative of. But yeah, it's unsettling. And a lot of smarter people than me have tried and probably failed to figure out what is driving this and what is driving his decision-making and communication strategy here.
Dave Weigel, a Republican, texted me a few moments ago, sort of half kidding perhaps, but speculating that Trump, feeling overconfident. His bill got through the House. He's feeling good. So he felt like he had momentum here to reignite his trade war.
That makes sense to me. That theory makes sense to me. Republicans are full of brio this week. They celebrated multiple times after getting their bill through the House. It makes perfect sense that Trump would look at that environment, look at the aftermath, and look at not the bond markets. Let's leave those aside, but other investors and how they've reacted to his reversals. If he thinks that a lot of investors have gotten used to him threatening tariffs and then rolling them back, and they can keep investing with that semi-certainty, then he's kind of right. He's been testing the bounds of this, and what's been the cost to him? But some money lost, but 5 points in the polls. He's still in better shape than he was at this point 8 years ago. You can understand why he has some confidence or overconfidence.
Yeah, clearly socializing people to the fact that the only constant is going to be him continuing to stoke uncertainty with this trade war. I also think, John Lemire, there's an interesting opportunity here for us to look at the different ways that Trump is going to contend with these various heads of private organizations. We saw, for example, the call to Jeff Bezos when Amazon weighed potentially putting tariff increase prices on their websites for some of their cheaper goods to show people the impact of tariffs and the trade war. But now we're also seeing him threatening Tim Cook and telling them that unless they see the iPhone parts actually manufactured here, that they are going to face steeper tariffs. And of course, the concerns around the cost of an iPhone were immediate when these trade deals and trade tariffs were initially announced. So an interesting case study as we start to see that story continue to unfold, too.
And we got the perfect person joining us now to help explain it. Co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box and New York Times columnist, Andrew Ross Sorkin. So, Andrew, the market's reacting, as we just noted, poorly to these posts from the president. Let's do one at a time. First, the Apple thing, as Ali just mentioned. I mean, this is pretty extraordinary. This is not usually how democracies and capitalism works. The government saying, hey, you've got to do it this way, or we're going to use the levers of power to make your life really difficult.
Well, let's break apart a couple of things on the Apple story here. First of all, at least my understanding, and I think it's everybody's understanding, you can't just tariff one company directly. You can't just put a tariff, a 25% tariff, as the president has described, on Apple specifically. You put tariffs on countries. That's how this works. So invariably, if you start to try to sort of unwind what this really means, there's the possibility that anything coming from, frankly, India or China would have to have a minimum of a 25% tariff on it, because that would be the only way that you could tariff Apple at these levels. It also means that it would have an impact on every other product coming out of India or China. And right now, there had been an expectation that there would be a lot lower tariffs, at least coming out of a place like India. So we can think about that. There's the other component part of this, which is that the president has been quite vociferous about condemning the EU, other countries, about their regulations and critiques of American companies. For a very long time, they have said the EU and China and other countries have done a disservice to American businesses by trying to regulate them, by trying to criticize them. So it's very interesting to see here the president of the United States criticizing one of the most iconic American companies in the world, of course, having just met, by the way, with Tim Cook in the Oval Office earlier this week. And Tim Cook, at least historically, had been seen as somebody who had threaded a needle with President Trump over these past several years. Of course, the president came out and made a public comment about Tim Cook and Apple recently. This appears to be a doubling down on that. So the real question now, at least the way the markets are considering, is what, again, is the off-ramp? Is there an off-ramp? What does Apple have to offer? What is Tim Cook willing to offer? What is the president willing to accept? And I think there is some kind of bargain that will eventually be made. The question is when, and what does that ultimately look like?
So, Andrew, let's turn to the EU post this morning now, where, I mean, there seemed to have been this sense like, oh, the trade war is over. But this is a reminder, it is not. These were just pauses. Pauses. The only deal that got done was the UK, although, frankly, Trump also complaining about that today in a post, suggesting they need to be doing more with energy prices. Right. And now, but this is all temporary. He could bring back and even increase the tariffs on these countries. I mean, business leaders you're talking to must just be dismayed about the inconsistency.
It creates an enormous amount of volatility. To some degree, you could say you now know where the floor and the ceiling is on the way the markets think about this, right? When it seems like there are no tariffs, the market's up to 6,000, then at the bottom end, it's closer to 5,000. And maybe when it gets high, the president feels like he has leverage and is willing to let things move around a little bit as he tries to make these negotiations happen. But I think the bigger point is, to any extent that the market, investors, policymakers around the world have thought that we are close at hand to a deal, which is something we've been told repeatedly, at least in the context of the EU, we are not. And he said very emphatically and specifically that these negotiations aren't close. We still haven't heard from India. We still haven't heard from Japan, South Korea, all of the things that we had been told we were getting closer to. Now, it may very well be we'll wake up on Monday and there'll be deals. But I just think we have to look at all of this with a bit of skepticism about how quickly any deals will ultimately be reached.